Most people think you need millions of dollars to retire early. They imagine buying dozens of rental properties, becoming some sort of real estate mogul, or having a trust fund from wealthy parents. But what if I told you that retiring early with real estate could be as simple as buying just one house? What if the secret to financial independence isn't about accumulating a massive portfolio, but about making one smart strategic decision that most people completely overlook? My name is Nick, and I help people understand how simple real estate strategies can create life-changing wealth. If you're tired of the traditional retirement plan that keeps you working until you're 70, make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the like button if this information helps you break free from the conventional wisdom. Here's something that might surprise you. While everyone else is chasing the latest investment trends or trying to time the stock market, there's a straightforward real estate strategy that has quietly made more people financially independent than almost any other approach. It doesn't require you to become a landlord to dozens of tenants, and it doesn't need you to flip houses or understand complex real estate markets. In fact, it's so simple that most people dismiss it entirely because they're looking for something more complicated. The strategy I'm talking about involves purchasing one carefully selected house and using a method that most homeowners never even consider. This isn't about buying the fanciest property you can afford or finding some hidden gem in an up-and-coming neighborhood. It's about understanding how real estate can work for you in ways that go far beyond simple appreciation or rental income. Before we dive into the specifics, let me paint a picture of what this looks like in practice. Imagine owning a property that not only provides you with a place to live, but also generates enough passive income to cover all your living expenses within 15 to 20 years. Picture having the freedom to retire in your 40s or 50s, not because you inherited money or hit the lottery, but because you made one intelligent real estate decision in your 20s or 30s. This might sound too good to be true, especially if you've been told that real estate investing requires significant capital, perfect credit, or years of experience. The reality is that this strategy works for ordinary people with ordinary incomes who simply understand how to leverage one property in an extraordinary way. The foundation of this approach lies in something called house hacking, but we're going to take it several steps further than most people ever consider. Traditional house hacking involves buying a duplex or multi-unit property, living in one unit, and renting out the others. While that's a solid strategy, what I'm going to show you can work with a regular single-family home and can be even more powerful over the long term. Here's where most people get it wrong. They think about real estate in terms of monthly cash flow, focusing on whether a rental property will generate a few $100s per month in profit. While cash flow is important, it's not the primary wealth-building mechanism in this strategy. The real power comes from combining several wealth-building forces that most investors never fully utilize. The first force is what I call strategic appreciation. This isn't about hoping your property value goes up, though it probably will over time. Instead, it's about buying in areas where appreciation is more predictable and sustainable. This means looking for properties near growing job centers, upcoming infrastructure projects, or areas where housing supply is naturally constrained. But here's where it gets interesting. Most people buy a house, live in it for 30 years, and eventually own it free and clear. They think this is smart because they've eliminated their housing payment. What they don't realize is that they've trapped hundreds of thousands of dollars in an asset that's not working for them anymore. The strategy I'm teaching takes a completely different approach. Instead of paying off your house and calling it a day, you use the equity you've built to acquire additional income-producing assets. This creates what I call a wealth multiplication effect, where your one house becomes the foundation for an entire financial empire. Let me break down exactly how this works. You start by purchasing a property that meets specific criteria. First, it needs to be in an area with strong rental demand. This doesn't mean the most expensive neighborhood in town. Often the sweet spot is in middle-class areas where working professionals want to live but might not be ready to buy yet. Second, The property should have potential for improvement. This doesn't mean you need to become a contractor or spend months renovating. Simple improvements like updating fixtures, improving curb appeal, or optimizing the layout can significantly increase both the rental income and the property value. Third, and this is crucial, you need to buy at the right price. This means being patient and waiting for opportunities rather than rushing into the first property you see. The difference between buying at market price and buying at a discount can literally be worth hundreds of thousands of dollars over the life of your investment. Once you own the property, here's where the magic happens. Instead of just collecting rent and hoping for appreciation, you actively manage the investment to maximize its potential. This might involve strategic renovations, optimizing rent rates, or even converting unused space into additional rental income. But the real breakthrough comes when you understand how to use your growing equity. As your property appreciates and you pay down the mortgage, you're building wealth in two ways simultaneously. The appreciation increases your net worth, while the mortgage payments increase your ownership stake. After several years, you'll have significant equity that most people just let sit there doing nothing. This is where the retirement acceleration happens. Instead of letting that equity remain trapped, you can access it through refinancing or a home equity line of credit. But here's the key. You don't use this money for consumption or lifestyle upgrades. You use it to acquire additional income-producing assets. These additional assets don't have to be more real estate, though they certainly can be. You might invest in dividend-paying stocks, bonds, or even start a business. The important thing is that you're using the equity from your one house to create multiple income streams. As these income streams grow, something remarkable happens. Your total passive income begins to approach and eventually exceed your living expenses. When your investments generate enough money to cover your basic needs, you've achieved what most people call financial independence. You can choose to keep working if you enjoy it, but you're no longer dependent on a paycheck to survive. The timeline for this process varies depending on your starting point, the property you choose, and how aggressively you pursue the strategy. Some people achieve financial independence in 10 to 15 years, while others might take 20 to 25 years. Either way, it's significantly faster than the traditional retirement timeline of 40 years. What makes this approach so powerful is that it doesn't require you to sacrifice your quality of life or live like a monk for decades. You're living in a nice house, building equity, and creating wealth simultaneously. You're not choosing between enjoying your life today and securing your financial future. You're doing both at the same time. The psychological benefits are just as important as the financial ones. When you know that your housing situation is not only taken care of, but is actively building your wealth, it changes how you think about money and your future. You develop confidence that comes from knowing you're on a path to financial freedom, even if you're not there yet. This confidence often leads to better career decisions, more calculated risks, and opportunities that wouldn't be available to someone living paycheck to paycheck. When you have a foundation of real estate equity, you can afford to take that job with more growth potential but less immediate security. You can start that business you've always dreamed about because you know your housing costs are covered. Most people never realize that their biggest financial mistake isn't what they buy, it's what they don't do with what they already own. While your neighbors are obsessing over their 401k contributions and arguing about whether to invest in index funds or individual stocks, you're sitting on what could be the most powerful wealth-building tool they'll never understand. The beauty of this single house strategy is that it scales with your life circumstances. When you're young and just starting out, maybe you're house hacking by renting out rooms to friends or finding a duplex where you can live in one unit. As you get older and your income grows, you might move to a larger property and rent out your entire first house. And the key is that each move builds on the previous one, creating a compound effect that most people miss entirely. Here's where things get really interesting and where most real estate gurus completely miss the boat. They're always talking about buying more properties, accumulating rental units, and becoming some sort of real estate empire builder. But what they don't tell you is that managing multiple properties can become a full-time job. Dealing with tenant issues, maintenance problems, and vacancy rates across a dozen properties isn't exactly the passive income paradise they promise. The one house strategy sidesteps all of this complexity. You're not trying to become a professional landlord or real estate mogul. You're simply maximizing the potential of one well-chosen property while keeping your life manageable and your stress levels reasonable. Let me give you a real-world example of how this plays out. Suppose you buy a house for $420,000 when you're 30 years old. You put down 20%, so your mortgage is $336,000. Over the next 10 years, two things happen simultaneously. The house appreciates at a modest 4% annually, bringing its value to about $620,000. Meanwhile, your mortgage balance drops to roughly $270,000 through your monthly payments. Now, here's where most people make their critical error. They look at their situation and think, great, I have $350,000 in equity. I should pay off the rest of my mortgage and own my house free and clear. This feels safe and responsible, and your grandmother would probably approve. But it's actually one of the worst financial decisions you could make. Instead of trapping that equity in your house where it earns nothing, you could access it through refinancing or a home equity line of credit. Let's say you pull out $200,000 of that equity. Now you have cash to invest while still maintaining a reasonable loan-to-value ratio on your primary residence. Here's where the magic happens. That $200,000 invested conservatively at 7% annually generates about $14,000 per year in passive income. That's nearly $1,200 per month that you didn't have before, all because you understood how to put your equity to work instead of letting it sit idle. But we're just getting started. As your house continues to appreciate and you continue paying down the mortgage, your equity grows even faster. In another 5 years, you might have enough equity to pull out another $150,000. Now, your passive income jumps to over $2,400 per month. The compound effect accelerates from here. Your investments are growing, your property is appreciating, and your mortgage balance is shrinking. By the time you're 50, that single house purchase you made when you were 30 could be generating enough passive income to cover a significant portion of your living expenses. What's really remarkable is how this strategy adapts to different life stages and circumstances. If you're single and just starting out, you might buy a small house and rent out rooms. If you're married with kids, you might choose a larger property in a good school district that will appreciate well over time. If you're closer to retirement, you might focus on properties in areas where you'd actually want to live long term. The flexibility is what makes this approach so powerful. You're not locked into some rigid investment strategy that only works under perfect conditions. You're creating a foundation that can evolve with your life while consistently building wealth in the background. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. What about the risks? What if the real estate market crashes? What if interest rates skyrocket? What if your area becomes economically depressed? These are legitimate concerns, and anyone telling you that real estate is risk-free is selling you something. But here's what's interesting about the one house strategy. It's actually more resilient to these risks than most people realize. Unlike someone who owns 10 rental properties and depends entirely on rental income, you have flexibility. If the market softens, you can adjust your strategy. If rates rise significantly, you can pay down debt instead of leveraging up. If your area struggles economically, you have options that someone with multiple properties simply doesn't have. The psychological aspect of this can't be overstated either. There's something deeply satisfying about knowing that your housing situation is not just taken care of, but is actively building your wealth. While your coworkers are complaining about their rent increases or mortgage payments, you're watching your net worth grow month after month, year after year. This peace of mind translates into better decision making in other areas of your life. When you're not stressed about housing costs or worried about retirement, you can take calculated risks that lead to greater opportunities, like you might negotiate harder for that promotion, start that side business, or make the career change you've been considering. The ripple effects compound over time. Better career decisions lead to higher income, which can accelerate your wealth building even further. The confidence that comes from financial security opens doors that remain closed to people living paycheck to paycheck. Perhaps most importantly, this strategy teaches you to think like a wealthy person rather than just trying to accumulate money like everyone else. Wealthy people understand that assets should work for them, not the other way around. They know that equity trapped in a house is just as useless as money stuffed under a mattress. They leverage their assets strategically to create multiple income streams and build lasting wealth. The one house retirement strategy isn't just about real estate. It's about developing a mindset that sees opportunities where others see obstacles, that values cash flow over net worth statements, and that prioritizes long-term wealth building over short-term gratification. When you truly understand this approach, you realize that retiring early isn't about having millions of dollars in the bank. It's about creating enough passive income to cover your expenses while maintaining the flexibility to pursue work that you actually enjoy. It's about having options instead of obligations, choices instead of constraints. This is why the traditional financial advice industry doesn't want you to know about this strategy. Think about it for a moment. If everyone understood that they could retire early with just one house, who would need those expensive financial advisors charging 2% annually to manage their retirement accounts? Who would buy all those complicated investment products with hidden fees and mediocre returns? The financial services industry thrives on complexity and confusion. They want you to believe that building wealth requires sophisticated strategies, perfect market timing, and professional management. The truth is, some of the most effective wealth building strategies are so simple that a teenager could understand them. Unfortunately, Simple doesn't sell expensive courses or generate ongoing management fees. Let me share what happens when you actually implement this strategy over a 20-year period. The numbers might shock you, especially when you compare them to what most people achieve following conventional retirement advice. Remember our example from earlier? You bought that $420,000 house when you were 30. By age 50, here's what your financial picture could look like. Your original house is now worth approximately $760,000, assuming that modest 4% annual appreciation. Your mortgage balance has dropped to about $120,000, giving you over $640,000 in equity. But here's where it gets interesting. Over those 20 years, you've strategically accessed your growing equity 3 separate times to make additional investments. The first time at age 40, you pulled out $200,000 and invested it conservatively. By age 50, that investment has grown to approximately $395,000. The second time at age 45, you accessed another $150,000 of equity. That investment is now worth about $210,000. And just last year, you did it again, pulling out $100,000 for your most recent investment. Your total investment portfolio outside of your house is now worth over $700,000. At a conservative 4% withdrawal rate, that's generating $28,000 annually in passive income. Add in the rental income from your house if you've decided to move elsewhere, and you could easily be looking at $40,000 to $50,000 per year in passive income. But wait, there's more. And I promise this isn't some late night infomercial pitch, though the results might seem too good to be true. That equity in your house isn't just sitting there looking pretty. It's available for future investments, business opportunities, or whatever life throws your way. You've essentially created your own personal bank with over $600,000 in available credit. Compare this to your coworker who followed traditional advice. They've been maxing out their 401k for 20 years, contributing about $7,000 annually. With employer matching and market returns, they might have $400,000 saved. That sounds decent until you realize they've contributed over $140,000 of their own money to get there, while you've built significantly more wealth using money that was largely other people's money through mortgages and leverage. The psychological difference is enormous too. Your coworker is terrified of market crashes because their entire retirement depends on stock market performance. You're sleeping peacefully, knowing that even if the stock market disappeared tomorrow, you'd still own a valuable piece of real estate that people need for shelter. Try eating a stock certificate when times get tough and see how that works out for you. Here's something that most real estate educators completely miss, and it's probably the most important aspect of this entire strategy. The goal isn't to become a real estate investor in the traditional sense. The goal is to use real estate as a tool to achieve financial independence as quickly and safely as possible. There's a huge difference between these two approaches. The beauty of this strategy is that it's hiding in plain sight. While everyone else is debating crypto versus stocks or arguing about the perfect asset allocation, you could be quietly building wealth with something as boring as buying one house. Sometimes the most revolutionary ideas are the ones that make your accountant yawn. However, let's be honest about the current landscape. In 2025, this strategy faces some significant challenges compared to when housing was cheaper. The median home price is now over $400,000, and mortgage rates are hovering around 6.5 to 7% instead of the ultra low rates we saw in recent years. This means the barrier to entry is much higher than it used to be. But here's the thing. The fundamentals of the strategy remain just as powerful. If anything, the higher prices and rates make the equity building component even more valuable once you're in the game. Yes, you'll need a higher income or more creative financing to get started, but the wealth building potential is actually greater because you're starting with a more valuable asset. The key is understanding that while the strategy is more challenging to initiate in 2025, it's not impossible. You might need to consider areas slightly outside major metropolitan centers, look for properties with house hacking potential, or be more patient in finding the right deal. But for those who can navigate the higher entry costs, the long-term rewards are potentially even greater than they were in previous decades. So stop waiting for the perfect moment or the perfect property. Start looking for that one house that will change everything. Your future self will thank you, and your current self might actually enjoy the process, because retiring early shouldn't require you to live like a hermit or become a real estate mogul. Sometimes you just need to be smart enough to let one house do the heavy lifting.